Hello everyone and welcome to another video of Mr. Mark Explains History. We continue our story about the Cold War and we're going to talk about the Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference is important because the Grand Alliance meets here and they discuss various issues about the post-war world. And some say that this is already a big cause for the Cold War, or that maybe the Cold War started there, or at least that some seeds were planted for the Cold War at the Yalta Conference. So we're going to talk about that in this video, why that was the case, what were they discussing, what were they agreeing about, but also disagreeing about. So in the previous video we talked about the Grand Alliance, how it was formed, as they were fighting the same enemy, Nazi Germany, and that around, let's say, 1943 it became clear that the Nazis would be defeated. They met in Tehran for the first time, the Big Three, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt. And today we're going to talk how they meet for the second time in Yalta, and in the next video we'll talk about the Potsdam Conference, the final big conference of World War II. So what was again discussed in Tehran? There were like three big questions. The first was about actually defeating Germany. So how can we really defeat them? And they agreed that they should open a second front and not just let the Soviets, the Red Army, fight in the east, but also open a second front in France to fight the Nazis on two fronts. Probably one of the biggest questions was what to do with the world after the Axis powers have been defeated. So what to do with the post-war world. And also an important issue is what to do with Germany. So after they have been defeated, should you rebuild it? Should you punish them hard? This is one of the big questions that was there, let's say, asked for the first time there, and which will be discussed at all the future conferences we're going to talk about. So a little bit about the setting. So the Big Three who were at Tehran met again. So Churchill here, Roosevelt, and Stalin, and they met in Yalta, which is Crimea, modern day Ukraine. It's also a little bit of a symbolic location because it had been occupied before, earlier in the war, by the Nazis. It had been liberated, so it's great to meet there. And the next conference takes place in Potsdam, which is next to Berlin. So that's another symbolic location. They meet on, let's say, ground that used to be ruled by the Nazis. So Yalta is here. At the time they are discussing a lot of the land that the Nazis had occupied has been liberated already. Some people might argue it's been conquered by the Soviet Union or reconquered from the Nazis. At least it's under the control of the Soviets now. And here in the West, the UK and the US have taken a lot of land from Nazi Germany. So they have not been defeated yet. They are meeting in Yalta about what to do with Europe and Germany especially, and the world after they have been defeated, let's say. So let's talk a little bit about the members of the Grand Alliance. What do they want? So they discuss, they meet each other, and what do they hope to achieve from these conversations? What are their aims? What is very important for the Soviets is security, and is that they will feel, let's say, that this won't happen again. So that Operation Barbarossa, Germany invading the Soviet Union, that this won't happen again. And they want a large sphere of influence in Eastern Europe, so a kind of buffer zone with countries that are within their, let's say, control, their influence, so that they won't be invaded anymore. This is their first, let's say, big aim. So create a group of countries that are closely tied to the Soviet Union so that they won't get invaded again. The second aim has to do with that too. So they want a really weak Germany, so that if Germany is very weak and that they have to pay a lot of reparations to the Soviet Union for all the damage done in World War II, that a weak Germany can also not invade them again. So they want to keep them as weak as possible and make Germany pay for the war and pay a lot of reparations. And the final thing is that they would like to prevent a future war. They want some international cooperation, but not too much. They don't want to give up any, let's say, power or be bound by any kind of agreements. So they want limited international cooperation and maintain a lot of independence. So their main concern is safety, keep control over Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and have, let's say, keep Germany weak to prevent a future invasion of the Soviet Union. What do the other powers want? What does the West want? The US and the UK. Instead of spheres of influence, they like the countries that have been liberated or that will be liberated to have self-determination. They can determine themselves who their leaders should be, who should rule them. So there should be democratic elections in the liberated countries. So in countries like Poland was a main issue. They say Poland should have free elections. Germany, according to the US and the UK, should be rebuilt, and they don't want to repeat the same mistakes as after World War I. So after World War I, Germany got punished really hard. They had to pay a crazy amount of reparations, and this created a very bad economic situation. It created a lot of hate towards, let's say, those countries. It created a feeling of revenge, and Hitler really used those feelings to rise to power. So the West wants to prevent this and rebuild Germany as a proper democratic nation, peaceful nation, get rid of all the bad elements, denazify it, and rebuild it. And the final thing related to that is to also rebuild all the other countries and work together internationally as much as possible. So strong international cooperation, not just an organization like the UN, which we're going to talk about, but also the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. They meet before Yalta already at Bretton Woods in the US, and there they decide to start the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which will financially help countries that need to be rebuilt and reconstructed after World War II. So by helping them develop, supporting them, they will become more stable and conflict can be prevented too. So those aims, they are a little bit different about each of the three things. So let's talk about what they decide actually at Yalta. So what are like the key agreements? The first one seems to be a victory for the West, that they get their way. The three signed the Declaration of Liberated Europe, that all the countries that have been liberated should have democratic elections. So I like this meme saying that Churchill and Roosevelt, that they kind of say that like, we're going to institute democracy, right? And Stalin says, yes. He also signed this. Actually, no, because after World War II, we're going to see there were like, let's say, elections, but it was all rigged or fake, and he didn't really stick to his word about this, spoiler alert, but they kind of agreed that, so the West was happy there. They agreed there should be democratic elections in Central Eastern Europe, in, for example, Poland. The second thing was about Germany, right? So what to do with Germany, rebuild it or punish it or keep it weak. Well, they decide to divide it into different zones of occupation. So there is an American, a British, a French, and a Soviet zone. And the same happens in Berlin. So after, let's say, Germany has been defeated, they will occupy, each power will occupy one place and help it transition into a new German government. Also, there will be a new Polish border, so part of the German territory goes to Poland and part of Polish land in the east goes to the Soviet Union. They also agree about that. And then finally, about that international cooperation, the three powers agree to establish the United Nations. So this big organization, which still exists nowadays, that promotes peace in the world and helps to develop the world. I could do a whole video about how useful or not useful that is, but at least it's an organization where they keep talking to each other and to promote world peace. So they agree on that, but not really on any other organizations. For example, that World Bank or IMF, the Soviets don't join that in the end. So in the next video, we'll talk about the Potsdam Conference, where they talk about the similar issues. What are some developments in that regard, and other things that need to be discussed about the post-war world. So thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, and see you next time.